everybody. Thanks for joining us in this new episode of Looking Up. This is a podcast for Christian women. I'm Kathy Pollard, one of your hosts, and with me is Carla Moore, one of your other hosts. And Carla is in Denver, Colorado. I'm in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and we enjoy getting together once a week and having a good conversation about things that remind us to look up and remember God is in control no matter what. Carla, how are you?
I'm a little sore today.
Ooh, have you been doing something strenuous?
No, not that kind of sore, like grumpy.
Oh.
I didn't tell you about this in our chit chat beforehand, but
Great.
I'm a little salty. I went to the grocery store just now. Well, a little while ago this morning. And now they have all of the makeup behind glass.
What?
Locked up.
Oh.
Yes. And all I needed was like a $10 mascara.
Oh.
So I didn't know who to ask. I stood there. I stood in front of the glass for a while. I like jiggled it to see if maybe you're just supposed to open the door and get it.
Yeah.
And nobody came. And so I went to the camera because they had the little cameras that you could see yourself. And I waved into the camera. I was like, I need help. Nobody came. And so the pharmacy's nearby. So I walked over there and they said, can I help you? I said, I just need mascara. And she said, well, push this button and they'll come help you. So I pushed the button and waited and waited and waited and waited. And I pushed the button again and nobody came. And I was kind of getting a little more grumpy and more grumpy, which is not good. And I was trying to remind myself, this is not their policy. It's not the workers' problem. It's the problem of this world right now because people are stealing things.
Mm-hmm.
But I never did get my mascara and I need it because I need to pack it. But and then when I got up to the cash register, you have to have the little shopper card thing. And that makes me grumpy too, because John had taken it and did something with it. And I don't know where it is. It's probably in the car somewhere. And so I had to pay more than I should have had to pay. And I had to do it myself. Anyway, it just kind of put me in a little bit of a grumpy mood. I'm sorry. So,
well, I'm sorry. But you're wearing mascara now, aren't you?
Yeah, but it's real clumpy.
Yeah, time for a new tube.
It's time for a new tube.
Well, by the time this airs and everybody hears this story, you won't even be in this country.
That's true.
Where will you
I may be mascara-less, which doesn't really matter, but where will we be?
Will you be in Rome?
No, we're not doing Rome this time. We will be in, when this one comes out, we'll probably be in Greece somewhere.
Okay.
I really don't know because we haven't done this trip before. And by the way, Brian Ketchum made this really cool map, and I'll probably put it on my Facebook page. He put it in our little group, the group that's going. But it's a map. It's like an interactive map, and it has dots on each of the locations where we'll be. And then there's a little screen part right below it. I'm probably really not telling this very well, but he created it. So it says day 1. This is where we'll be. And so you click on that and it shows you where on the map you'll be. Day 2, you swipe it to the next page. Day 2, it shows where we'll be that day. So I'm excited about that. I need it. Yeah, I need it to know where we'll be.
Yeah, he's so tech savvy.
Yeah, he is. He's younger than us.
Smart kid. I know. He's my son. He's my son's age.
Yeah, not a kid, but 30 something. Yeah.
See, he'll always be a kid to me.
Because he played with your son.
Yeah. So everybody listening to this right now, say a prayer for Carla and the rest of the group. You guys will be gone a couple weeks. And so we'll be praying for really, really good trip and safety and all kinds of wonderful memories.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate those prayers.
Have you found anything exciting at the thrift store?
I didn't find it at the thrift store, but I found a really cool suitcase at Nordstrom Rack. And I don't go there very often because they don't have my kind of stuff. But I knew they had suitcases, and because we are taking a flight between Istanbul and Izmir on a little airline that is very specific about the size of what you can carry on. I think it must be kind of like Frontier Airlines or one of those airlines that will charge you, you have to pay for this arm of your seat and this arm of your seat, whatever. Right. So the carry-on that we can take is smaller than what I'm used to. And mine, I was needing a new one anyway. So anyway, I went in there and looked, and I found a small one, but I found a big one too, which I kind of needed. and it's a brand called Monos. I think it's Monos probably. And I had just come across them in passing as I was kind of looking for ratings on suitcases. And this one was very highly rated, but very expensive. And, I knew I wasn't going to do that, but I pulled one down off the rack and it was one of those. And it was a refurbished for $67. It's a $400 suitcase for $67. Wow. So I'm excited about it. John doesn't like hard side. Do you like hard side or soft side luggage?
I've never had a hard side.
Yeah. Well, there's good things about both of them. I think the hard side, I feel better about my stuff inside, but they can get dented up too. But this is supposed to be really a good outer shell. So anyway, I was excited to find that.
Good find. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? Have you been seeding anything?
I have not yet. What
I did. Your fingers are itching.
Oh man, I'm so ready. My sister even texted me today. She showed me a picture of some seed packets and said, "Do you want any of these?" And I was like, "Yes." I don't even know the story yet. Why do you have extra packets of seeds? I don't know. But yesterday, I've been doing something I've been meaning to do for a while, and where all of my things that I've canned are on the shelves on this black pantry thing. Not too long ago, I gave a jar of jam to Carl and Emily. Carl was looking at them and wanted one of them. And then she texted me later and said that it hadn't sealed properly. And so it had, I guess, something gross, on the top of it, which made me think I should probably go through. I mean, I've been doing this long enough now that some of that stuff up there is probably getting a little old. So that's what I did yesterday. I took everything down, went through every single thing, checked dates, checked seals, and I think I ended up cleaning out about 36 jars of things.
Oh, wow. And by cleaning out, do you mean you had to throw them away or what?
Yeah, I just, if they were old, I just went ahead and popped. Well, because I figured if they've been up there that long, we're not going to eat it. And I'm definitely not going to give it away.
Right.
Because it's already a couple years old. And so, but it was also good because I found a jar of barbecue sauce, which I thought I was completely out of. I didn't know I had any more of that left. And then I found there were a couple of jars of honeysuckle jelly that are from not this past summer, but the summer before. But I couldn't bring myself to get rid of that because I love that stuff so much. So I kept that, but I was able to kind of refresh everything, reorganize everything. And it was a big project, and I probably need to visit a chiropractor now because just trying to pop all those lids off, felt like my neck jerks every time I do that. I need a realignment or something. But
did you just do that with the ones that you knew were too old that you were going to get rid of? Or how do you check for sealing? Do you just check and see if it won't come off easily?
Yeah. Yes. I did that. Yeah. I got, so any old ones, and probably about 3 or 4 of them that I opened had moldy stuff in them. So, which makes me very nervous about ever giving anything away. That's like, I hope that's sealed, by the way.
Well, is there a way you would know?
I guess if I just checked it with my nail to see if, yeah. And then a couple of things I opened up to dump out. Like I made a peach butter about 3 years ago. I still had some of those up there. And when I opened them up to dump it out, it smelled like they had fermented into a completely new product.
You might have invented something new.
That's right.
It's apple butter kombucha.
Yeah. So anyway, felt good. Felt good to finally get that done.
I'm sure it did. I'm always afraid when there's something in the refrigerator that's, it's kind of on the edge. Like, it's been in there for a week, so it's probably okay, but it might not be. And I always end up saying it's not worth it. Like, that would just be the worst, especially if you fed it to somebody. And I don't do that, but I don't want me or John to get sick either. That's just the worst.
Yeah, I probably lean closer to the side of cautious. What am I trying to say? Cautious.
You hang on to it. You don't hang on to it.
I don't hang on to it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of my least favorite jobs is cleaning out the refrigerator. I'd rather take a beating.
Man. And ours gets such a beating with all the jars of milk day in and day out. Jars of milk going in, milk coming out, milk going in, milk coming out. I'm constantly wiping down the shelves. Even when you wipe the jars before you put them in there, somehow it just seems like there's always milk on the shelves themselves. So I'm just constantly, but it's okay. It's worth it.
Did you tell me you had an extra refrigerator?
We have one in the basement, a full size in the basement. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that helps sometimes.
They're both full. I was going to show you this book. So I was looking for a fat cookbook to put under my stack of books that prop up this laptop that we're recording on because we're high tech like that.
I know. I have two
Our
myself.
high tech studio here. Mm-hmm. But the first one I pulled out for those of you watching is this chocolate recipes. Look how fat it is. It's a pretty heavy duty, like 2-inch wide cookbook. But I got this book not long after we were married. I knew it was close to the time we got married, so I checked the date, and it was published in 1996. And it was published in the late 1900s. And we got married in 92. And I've kept it all this time for this one recipe.
Is that your deep dark chocolate cake?
That's the deep dark chocolate cake. Look how gross the page is. Can you see all that?
That's the mark of a great recipe, though.
Speckle spatter from the chocolate batter and all that kind of stuff. And so,
did you ever share that one? I feel like you need to share that recipe. I don't think I have that recipe.
I've even written in, look, can you see on this side, when we moved to Colorado, I had to write in like high altitude modifications. But I started thinking this book has like 370 something pages in it. It looks like each recipe is a 2-page spread. Shouldn't I go through, like, spend the rest of the year walking through and making each one of these recipes?
Absolutely. It's like Julie and Julia.
I mean, just to be a good steward, really, because I've only used one recipe out of this book all these years.
Yeah. Yeah. You need to make all those chocolate recipes.
So many chocolate recipes, so little time.
I am a fan of that idea.
Yes. So, how about you? Anything else you want to share?
I don't think so. I know we just kind of need to probably get on with it this week.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about something that I think probably most of us struggle with in some form or other. Maybe not to the same extent or even the same variety, but it's the idea of living with regret and what to do about that. What can we do about that? And so we've been talking about this for a while. And we were actually supposed to, was it last week we were supposed to do this one? And I said, yeah, I'm just not feeling it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about things we like instead. So that's when we did the favorite things.
Regret is not one of our favorite things.
No. And it's, it can be a heavy topic, but I just thought we'd spend a few minutes talking about it and maybe looking at different types of regrets, why we struggle with it, and then what can we do about it? So, to kick it off a little bit, the more I thought, I guess when I first started thinking about it, I was thinking mostly guilt type regret. There's things in your past maybe that you feel ashamed of or wish you could go back and do differently. And, it could be a sin that you committed, or maybe you let somebody down, or, but it could also be things that you intended to do and never did, just squandered opportunities or things like that. There's that. And time squandered is another one. Maybe when you look back over your parenting, obviously none of us parented perfectly, but maybe as you look back, now that you're older and more mature, you think, I would have handled that differently, or I wish I would have done this, or I can see how, or maybe the same could be said of your marriage, as you look back over choices that you made in marriage. Maybe it was a job or a task that you were assigned and you could have done better with it, or you didn't make the most of a situation. Maybe it was some sort of conflict that rose up, or somebody did you wrong and you just didn't handle it the way you should have. I can look back and see situations like that I have regret over. Maybe you're much older in years and you're looking back over your life and feel like you really haven't lived. Maybe you spent a lot of your life kind of holed up or kept to yourself. Maybe there were opportunities when you didn't talk about Christ and you could have. Or maybe it's just something as simple as things didn't turn out the way you expected. Whether it's a venture that you started or a relationship that you entered into. It just didn't, maybe it wasn't even your fault, but it didn't turn out the way you expected. And you have these regrets over how that turned out. So can you think of anything different? I tried to kind of hit everything that I could come up with of different types, but I'm sure there are probably more.
Yeah. Well, the only other one that I kind of thought of that I regret is not taking better care of myself when I was younger. And, things like something as simple or silly as, even though it's not silly, weight gain, and just not really watching that at an earlier age so that it's not so difficult to tackle when you're older. I wish that's kind of something that I have a regret. It's a little bit shallow, maybe, although health is not shallow, but
no, it's not. And I've said on here before that Neil's dad always says the old man lives with what the young man does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My mom has an article that she passed out a lot, that's called Meet an Old Lady. And it basically just says that the way you live your life as a young lady is who you will be, maybe in a more pronounced way as an old lady. So if you're grumpy, sort of grumpy when you're younger, you're really going to be cranky when you're older. If you're sweet and soft, then those things morph into a greater, I think, they solidify the older we get. So that's a good one, like what he says.
Yes, that reminds me of a conversation when we were first married, the very first work that we were at. There was a sweet little lady that everybody called Aunt Meg. And we were having a conversation one time in which she said something about long-term goals. And I said, well, I just want to be a sweet old lady. And she said, well, then you better start by being a sweet young lady.
Yeah,
I remember
exactly.
Kind of being caught off guard, but like you're saying, there's a lot of wisdom in that. And she probably knew that by now, by then. Yeah.
Well, I think if this is sort of being, it can have something to do with our personality, because I think some people are more concerned with regret and live in it, and other people don't. And so I think it sort of comes naturally or not naturally to certain people. I think about my father-in-law, he was one of the most forward-thinking people that I ever knew, just always thinking about down the road, something like he bought an easement attached to his property like 20 years before he ever needed to build a driveway or a road across that easement to be able to get to the backside of his property. And if he hadn't done that when he did it, it would have been a whole lot more expensive later and a lot more trouble, a lot more county regulations, things like that. But he was just always that way. He was somebody who tackled things before they got to be bad. And I tend to be one of those that sticks my head in the sand, and, I don't want to think about it. So I don't think about it. And so it just gets worse. And that's just not a way to be. And I need to be better about that.
I think I tend to be, I'm writing down forward thinking. I really like that. I think I tend to be the way you tend to be.
Yeah. I'll think about it tomorrow, Scarlett O'Hara.
That's right. For now, I'm going to have some chocolate.
One of those recipes.
That's right.
For sure.
Well, backtrack a little bit, and I'm really not trying to get off track. You had said something about choices you make with health when you're younger.
Yeah.
And I just happen to be doing more and more research these days on gaining weight later in life. Just random research, has nothing to do with me.
Nothing to do personally.
But I just learned this week that a lot of times the things that we're struggling with now are due to food choices that we made when we were younger.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know. That makes sense when you think about things like habit choices you make when you're younger, smoking, drinking, it kind of affects things. Sun exposure, I've always heard that one, that, the sun exposure that you had as a youth comes back to get you later, but I've never heard that before about food choices that you make when you're younger affect how hard it is to lose weight now.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that we are making this kind of a physical thing, and I know it's more of a spiritual thing, but I mean, I think it's important to talk about anyway. But fat cells, once you've got them, and they don't really go away. They stay there. They just keep waiting for the fat to come back when you get rid of it. So anyway,
there you are.
Yeah,
I feel like that's quotable, Carla. Fat cells. Once you've got them, you've got them.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I know that's true. I know personally that's true.
Okay, so that's a good one. I'm glad you brought that up. Are there any more different types of regret?
I think you mentioned them all.
Okay.
That I could think of anyway.
Yeah, and those listening in, we always welcome feedback. I don't know that we often mention this early on in the episode, but if there's something that you think of that we haven't, we'd love to hear from you later about that if you don't mind sharing. So regardless of what type we might be hanging on to and having a hard time letting go, whatever type of regret that is, why can it be such a struggle? And the first thing that comes to my mind, and probably the thing that I struggle with most, is if, say, it's a situation of regretting behavior or bad choices. You might be able to ask forgiveness. You might be able to practice repentance, but in some cases, there are still consequences that will always be there that you can't do anything about.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it hard, and you maybe you know that God's forgiven you, you've done everything you're supposed to do, but when there's carryover consequences that affected you or other people, sometimes it makes it harder to let go of that regret because that'll always be true. Mm-hmm. That consequence will always be there. And when it comes to the things involving time, time is that commodity you can't ever get back. So if it's something that you're looking back over your life and you see missed or squandered opportunities, that could be a reason why we struggle with that, because you can't ever get that commodity back. And then I thought about how it can affect our attitude when it comes to the regret over things that didn't turn out the way we expected. Really not because of anything we've done, but circumstances outside of our control. What can happen sometimes is that leads to sort of a resentment or bitterness that takes root in our heart. Mm-hmm. And so we're struggling with that. We resent the way things turned out, and they didn't go the way we planned or even we prayed about. And we can become resentful toward other people, toward God, toward life, and so that could be a reason we struggle with it. And then the last one I thought of, why it can be a struggle, is that we could live continually hard on ourselves. Mm-hmm. If we feel like we haven't done things the way we intended to or should have. And so we struggle with being hard on ourselves. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the what to do about it. So can you think of any other reasons why we might struggle?
Well, I just think that it's when you can't do anything about it, and the past is the past. And I think so many times we spend so much time just dwelling on the past rather than looking to the future. But when I was listening to a podcast that was talking about this, and he was saying the past, it's complete. It's as fixed as Mount Everest, he said. And there's just nothing you can do that can make it either better or worse. And the good news is you can't make it worse than it already is. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you can't make the past better, but you can move forward. And I know you're going to bring up some of the things that I'm thinking about. You can move forward to make what's ahead of you better, even if you can't make the past better. But if you continue to wallow in it and continue to live in the past, you're just continuing on with the very thing that you're sad about. So, it doesn't really make any sense to hang on to the past regrets like that. But yeah, consequences, that's a tough one, because when we're talking to people about salvation, about truth, about the gospel, and there's some changes that they know that they can make with God's help, but yet they also know that there's going to be consequences associated with it. That's pretty tough, and it takes a lot of courage. But the good news about that is that God's always going to meet you there and provide what you need. So doesn't mean it's not going to be tough, but at least God's moving through it with you, and you're not having to do it alone. So
yeah, good point. Okay, so this is how my mind kind of wrapped around this particular subject. Different types of regret, why it ends up being a problem. And then added to that are the problems of living with regret. There's various reasons we might struggle with it. Why is that even a problem? Why does it even need to be dealt with? Does it matter? Is it a big deal? Does it matter? And so I was thinking that it can keep us from moving forward. You mentioned your relative that's the most forward thinking person
John's dad. Yeah.
Yes. It can keep us from moving forward. It can keep us from accepting grace or forgiveness, beautiful gifts from God and other people. It can blind us to current blessings or opportunities, because we're still living in the past. We're still carrying around that regret or guilt or remorse or whatever it might be. And so we don't want to make the same mistakes, or maybe we don't feel worthy enough to move forward. And perhaps the most important one is, other people seeing us struggle with that. And I think the last thing anybody needs who is living with regret is more guilt piled on top of that. So I want to be careful how I say this, because I know it's a real hard thing and it's a real struggle. But at the same time, we need to remember other people are looking at us, people dear to us, people that we love, people that we have great influence over. And if they're seeing us trying to live the Christian life, but constantly feeling this weight of guilt or regret or remorse, what kind of message are we sending out? And where is our faith in the walking in the light life and what that's supposed to look like? And if we're living in such a way that it is becoming a problem, we could be living with regret and nobody knows it because we don't show it outwardly. But if we are, we're not showing the Christian life to be anything that anybody would have an interest in. Why would I want to live that kind of life? It looks like all you do is beat yourself up all the time.
One of the things, do you remember the conversation that we had? I know where we were. See if you remember where we were when we were talking about forgiving ourselves.
Were we in Israel?
In Israel.
Standing on a rooftop?
Well,
or is that actually we've had two conversations. Are you talking about under the tree at Caesarea Philippi?
No, not that one. Although I know what you're talking about, but this one was at that cistern. And Sandra was with us. Anyway, that doesn't matter. Everybody's like, why does this matter? Just move on.
So we've had a lot of these conversations apparently.
Right. But I remember us talking about this because I had heard a lesson, and I can't remember if you'd heard the lesson too, but someone was saying, it is not your job to forgive yourself. And he kind of was saying, it's really not your job to forgive yourself. That's God's job to forgive you, and you move on. And I remember when I heard it, I was struggling with something in particular at the time that I had not made right. And it was crushing to me to hear that, because I felt like it was guilt heaped on top of guilt. Like, so I'm already guilty of this and I'm struggling with moving past it myself. And yet you're saying, you're this guy, the preacher was saying, you're putting yourself in God's position. And that just made me like, I just feel like that was not the right way to handle that, because, and I remember about the situation is that you and I were saying this guy must have never been guilty of anything pretty hard, because he wouldn't know how that feels.
Right.
But, so without, devolving into the whole topic of forgiving self and forgiveness and all that, I do think that, when people are struggling to forgive themselves and move beyond regret, we have to be careful how we advise them, because we want to say, you've been forgiven, God's forgiven you. You need to move on. You need to stop wallowing in that. And maybe we find a better way of saying, talking about what scripture says about moving beyond that and being forgiven and God's grace and how God forgives and forgets about things. So anyway, I think it's important for us to be careful how we treat people who are struggling with this.
Well, God created us, and I think he knew that we would struggle with this. And that's why the Bible does have so much to say about, really from cover to cover, he's letting us know who he is, what he desires for us, how he feels about us, how he wants us to feel about ourselves and feel toward him, all the way through. It's not like one little passage that you have to go digging for and find. That's the message of the Bible.
Right.
And so he knew that would be something that we would struggle with.
One of the things that I looked at today too was something that was talking about how it's good to feel regret in some cases, because he said a life without regret is built on a mirage. It's like, if you don't have any regrets at all, then you are not remembering anything, because everyone has something in their past that they feel regret for. And so he was talking about the passage in Ephesians 2, and I don't want to stomp on something that you were planning on talking about.
I don't have that one. Go ahead.
Well, Ephesians 2, when he's talking about remembering, let me flip to it real quick. He says, well, remember this, the context, by grace you've been saved through faith, not as a result of works, so no one may boast, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. And he goes on to say, therefore, remember that formerly you, the Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by the so-called circumcision, which is performed in the flesh by human hands. Remember, this is the important part, remember that you were at that time separate from Christ, excluded from the commonwealth of Israel, strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope without God in the world. But then he goes on to say, but now in Christ Jesus, you who formerly were far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ. So, I think he's talking about how when we remember where we used to be, remember where we came from, remember what God forgave us of, that deepens our appreciation for God's mercy and forgiveness. And so remembering is not a bad thing. Remembering those things is a good thing, unless we get stuck in it and mired in it and can't move beyond it, and we forget the but now parts of the gospel.
That's really good. I hadn't even thought about that. That's good.
Yeah. Well, in Philippians 3, what Paul says, he talks about forgetting what lies behind. And if anybody, was that something you were already going to talk about?
No.
Well, just if anybody, this man who'd persecuted Christians and drug them into prison and done worse things than that, just imagine the regret he lived with. And yet he said, I forget those things that are behind and I press on. And I love that. That just reminds me that he didn't ever forget those things that he was guilty of, but he didn't let them have preeminence in his mind. He did what was right. He did good things and he kept going. I think too about how he would have been, or at least I would feel like if I had been Paul had done the things that he had done, I would have been like, I have no ground to stand on. I can't advise you. I was, and he says I was the chief of sinners. But yet it doesn't stop him from saying, this is the way you should live. This is the way you should be. So I admire that about him.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think a perfect segue into if this is something that anybody is struggling with, that we all have regrets, like we say, but maybe it's holding us back or something that's really weighing on us. We can feel the heaviness of it. What can we do about it? And so the first thing that I thought of, plain and simple, was just act now. As long as you're still breathing, there's still opportunity for whatever it might be. If it's something that, maybe still needs to be handled in a relationship, use wisdom there. Does it need to be dug up, right, and brought to the surface? So use wisdom there. But if it's something that needs to be handled, handle it. If it's something that, there's still an opportunity to address it in some way, we can still live meaningfully right now. We can still live meaningfully. Neil and I had this conversation not too long ago because we were talking about the fact that sometimes we say things that makes it sound like we're winding things down. We're all our kids are grown and they're starting their own families now, and you're thinking about what are our retirement years going to look like, and what are our, it always sounds to me like we're winding things down. Well, we've had a good run, dear. And finally, one day I just said, if we live into our 80s, that's over 30 years away. And that's how long we've been married. We've been married 31 years, which seems like a lifetime going clear back. So we still, technically, assuming we live that old, we potentially could have that whole lifetime still ahead of us. So, and I think maybe sometimes we feel that way when it comes to regret. Well, I've really blown it now. It's too late now. But if you're breathing and you're alive and you can live meaningfully and glorify God today, just do it. Just, that's probably oversimplifying, but just do it. And I thought the second simple answer is to pray about it. We just talked about the fact that God knows us better than we know ourselves. He already knows our struggles, but we can take it to him and just, if it's something that we're having a hard time letting go, we can pray about asking him to help us let that go.
Yeah.
Or see it the way he sees it. Maybe having the right, like some of the things that you mentioned, regret can be a good thing. Remembrance can be a good thing. See it the right way, understand it the right way. Another thing to do with it is use it to be understanding with others who might struggle with it, because we can allow that to make us be more patient. And maybe it's with somebody who has wronged us in some way, sometime in the past. Maybe they're struggling with regret over that. And we can do our part to make that as easy as we can for them to let that go. Yeah. Maybe that means reassuring them or not ever bringing it up or whatever that looks like. But we can use it to be more understanding with others. Study about it.
I think there's some people, and I would include myself in this, that if there's something in your past that you're guilty of and there's people that know about it, I think that we tend to think, well, say, for example, and you do know some things about me. But it's a temptation sometimes to think that that's the first thing that you think about when you see me. Yeah. And I know you don't. I'm just using this as an example.
Right.
But so, it's hard to go be around people when you know that they know things that you're guilty of. But I think we forget those things. I know I do. In fact, the reason I'm thinking of this is because I had a friend who said this to me one time, like, but you know the worst about me. Like, I had to really stop and think what in the world she was talking about, because that was so far in the past. And
I do?
Yeah. Like, wait, tell me again. What was it you did?
What do I know about you?
Yeah. But I mean, in a way
that's a good point.
And even more so, that's what God does for us. He remembers those things no more. And some of that, when you look at that definition, it means that he purposely does not call it to mind. It's an intentional thing. Not that because God can do whatever God's going to do, but he puts that in our past and doesn't bring it back up anymore. And I think we're the ones, it's like a yo-yo sometimes. We throw it to God and then we pull it back. It's like, I'm not ready to give this up. I'm not ready to completely let go of my guilt. And but God doesn't do it that way. We do it that way.
Yeah, I think most often we see people for who they are now. And the way they're living, acting, behaving now. And I remember years ago hearing something about somebody, that did surprise me. It blew my mind. I never in a million years would have guessed that this could happen to that person or whatever. And didn't change my view toward that person one whit. I just, like you said, just never thought about it again. I just knew and loved them for who they are now. And, I think that's how it's supposed to be. Good point. Another thing is to study about it, because as we've mentioned, the Bible does have a lot to say about regret or remorse and all those things having to do with the past and opportunities. So that would be a good personal Bible study if somebody's struggling with that.
I looked up some but nows this morning because when I was looking at Ephesians 2 and but now. So then I went and looked at some other places that said but now. And I thought that would be a really good Bible marking.
I was just thinking that when you said that. Yeah.
But it, like in I didn't write down, I guess I didn't. Yeah. Romans has a bunch of but now. In fact, it was interesting to see where that phrase was used the most was in Romans, and talking about before, but now God does this. But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been manifested. But now, having been freed from sin, so it's about sanctification, but now we've been released from the law, but now we've been shown mercy, but now grace is manifest. So there's a bunch of remembers in there, but the remembers are almost always things that God wants us to call to mind so that we can be better from then on, not so we can beat ourselves over the head. So
question, if I do a Bible marking article on but now, do I have to give you credit?
Yes. You have to put my picture on it.
Okay, it's a deal. All right, so here's another thought. Make sure it's not a crutch. And I think that, maybe because you messed up, maybe because the situation didn't turn out the way you expected or planned or whatever, we use it as sort of this crutch or excuse to keep us from growing, moving forward, serving, reaching out, opening up your heart, whatever it might be, fill in the blank. We really can, even though it's what started out as a genuine struggle, isn't that the way with a lot of them? What starts out as a genuine struggle can end up being almost a security blanket in a way, if that makes sense. And we start using it as a crutch to say, well, I'm just not that person. I'm not the right person.
Yeah.
That's not for me. I don't need to have anything to do with that. Like you
I'm
were
not
saying.
good enough for that.
Exactly. And if anybody would have had that, if we had an example of anybody doing that, it would have been Paul. For the reasons you've already mentioned. And he didn't. He was a willing vessel, ready to be poured out for God in his service. And so make sure it's not a crutch.
Who wants us to be living in regret? Who wants to? I mean, he's the accuser. The devil is the accuser. And even some of the accusations that he makes against us are not untrue, but we have an advocate that is for us and stands between us and protects us and advocates for us. So I just sometimes I have to remember, who is it that wants me to think this way and God wants me to think that way, and which one am I going to let reign in my mind? So I think that plays a part in regret.
And don't you know people that are close to you that you love dearly that do struggle with that, and it just breaks your heart? And you just want to take them and you want to hug them and say, you don't have to feel this way about yourself. God doesn't. I don't, and it breaks my heart that you even struggle with this. And I think maybe sometimes we need to extend the same charity to ourselves, that God does and that we do for people we love, because we don't want them to feel that way. And we don't want them to carry that burden. We want them to be able to let it go and see themselves the way God does.
Yeah, and one of those great studies would be to study how it is that God feels about us.
Yeah. Is it a regret that can be let go, or is it refined conscience that's letting you know something needs to be addressed? So I think this goes back to what you were saying. Regret can be a good thing. Is it something you can walk away from and shut the door on and just let it go? Or is there something still nagging at you because it does need to be addressed? And you do need to make something right. There's a little bit of a difference there. So
when remembering something makes us love the Lord more because of what he's done for us, if remembering is something that makes me want to serve more because maybe I didn't serve as much as I should have in the past, if remembering is something that that just makes me so grateful and thankful for the grace of God, then I think remembering is a good thing. But it's when we are like paralyzed with fear, if it's a situation where we're just not taking any steps toward God, then that's something that we need to really pray about letting go and forgetting and moving on, pressing on. So remembering and forgetting, moving on.
And even if that's just one day at a time, that's one more day of not living in regret. And then really the last thing I have is the passage that we all know and love in Lamentations 3 about the new every morning. But I wanted to focus in on verse 19. Before all of that, in Lamentations 3, starting at verse 19, he says, "Remember my affliction and my wanderings, the wormwood and the gall." So he's like, all these different things from different directions. Some things are things that I've done. Some things are things that have happened to me. All these different things. Remember my affliction, my wanderings. He says in verse 20, "My soul continually remembers it and is bowed down within me." So you can just see that he's bowed over with the weight of all that stuff. But the but is in verse 21. "But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him." So what he was thinking about, he turns around and he starts thinking about, but I'm going to call this to mind instead.
And a choice.
And that's the perfect what to do. when those regrets are just bowing you down, whatever it may be, call to mind instead the steadfast love of the Lord and his mercies that are new every morning. There wasn't well, you messed up back then, so that was the end of it. Every day, they're still there for you. Right. And think about that instead. And he says, therefore I have hope. Therefore I have hope. He says that twice. I'll hope in him.
Yeah.
And aren't we grateful for that we don't have to hope in ourselves and our own merits or anything. Our hope is in the steadfast love of the Lord.
Yeah. Well, that preacher that was talking about, it's not your job to forgive yourself. It was a matter of faith, he said. We need to have more faith that God is going to do the right thing. And I do have every faith that God's going to do the right thing, but it's still something that I hurt about, ache about, not so much anymore, but there's a time. But, that passage that says, I believe, help my unbelief. I want that above my door. I want that on one of those Hobby Lobby signs. Maybe I need to make it myself because I feel this all the time. I think, the context of the man who asked Jesus to heal his son from I guess it was a demon possession of some sort. And Jesus, he said, if you can. And Jesus said, if I can. And you need to have more faith, basically. And the man said, I believe, but help my unbelief. And I feel that about this because I believe that God will do and has done what he says he will do. But sometimes my human nature and my heart uses that against me. The devil accuses me of something. And so I ask God to help me in my unbelief. And I just think that helps me all the time. I believe, but help my unbelief. It's a prayer that I pray.
But the brain knows sometimes the heart has a hard time embracing.
Exactly.
That's really good. That's a great thing to end on. But if you have more to say, we don't have to be ending.
No regrets.
No regrets. Okay. All right. So I think that was a great conversation. Very helpful for me. Thank you so much. Do you have something good for you for our listeners?
I do. It feels a little bit.
What you
feels
got?
A little bit shallow compared to the conversation, but it's YouTube TV. Do you know about YouTube TV?
That you can watch TV shows on YouTube?
Well, we got rid of cable because, or whatever they want to call it, direct TV, dish TV, all that stuff. And we had our kids are all on YouTube TV. And then basically it's a streaming service, but you can have your local channels. It's just like TV, but it has less channels, which we didn't use anywhere near all the channels that we had with Dish Network or whatever. But YouTube TV, it looks like cable. I mean, it has the grid where you can look to see what you want to watch, but it's really good for us because we can carry it back and forth between Trippin and Denver. And it's just, if you've got to show my ignorance here, we have a Roku, but I don't even think you have to have a Roku. If you have like an Apple TV, it's like an app. Like if you have Netflix or if you have Disney Plus, or if you have any of those streaming things, you could do YouTube TV, and it's just local news channels, and it has some sports channels. I think you can choose some of what you have. It has, the kids channels, things like that. We basically use it for local channels, and I think there's Fox News, stuff like that. But anyway, it's much, much cheaper than one of those cable things, and there's no contract. So anyway, YouTube TV is my something good. I'll put a link out next week.
We got rid of our cable also. So we just have streaming things and we keep going back and forth. We had Netflix for a while. We got rid of that.
Yeah.
We had Discovery for a while. We finally got rid of that. So I don't know what all we have, but it feels like we just keep shuffling it around. Well, let's try this one. Let's try this one.
Well,
we haven't tried YouTube TV.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you may not even want it if you don't want local channels because you can probably get the things that you want to watch. But for people who want network TV or just a little bit more variety, that's not just Netflix or just Prime or whatever. We like YouTube TV.
Good one.
Okay, what's yours?
Okay, so my something good for you is definitely just for the girls. So our probably 2 male listeners that are related to us, you can check out now. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in. My something good for you is for the older women who may feel things changing in their life might have moments of warmthness that they don't like, and
flashes of heat
and fogginess and other random weird things. And somebody that's close to me, oh, it's me.
Oh, continue.
Started with the hot flashes. Okay. And so Tammy Roberts, I was talking to her about it one day, and she told me about this natural supplement. It's by Nature's Way. It's AM and PM perimenopause formula. So it looks like this for those of you who are watching.
Yeah.
And you take one in the morning and one at night. And so the morning one is supposed to help you concentrate. And then the night one is supposed to help with the hot flashes and sleep and, all that kind of stuff. And I never have had anything really bad except for the weight gain. But some people have the hot flashes where they wake up soaked in a sweat. I've never had anything like that, but I would have hot flashes uncomfortable enough so I would wake up, flip the covers off, go back to sleep, then wake up freezing, covers back on, all night long. It's the toss, covers off, covers on. And so she told me about this, and she said when you start taking it, give it, maybe a month or so. Well, I'm telling you, within a few days, my hot flashes were gone. And I like the fact that it's all natural. So like the PM formula has black cohosh, valerian, hops, things like that. And the daytime formula is chasteberry, green tea, something I don't know about. But anyway, it's so I've got this on subscription on Amazon.
Yeah.
And it shows up in my mail every 30 days. Because for not too long ago, I said, I've been taking this for a little while. I'm gonna stop taking it and see if there's even a difference. And my hot flashes came back.
Yeah. Well, good to know.
Yeah. So I reordered it.
You told me about that, and I haven't tried it.
And they actually have, if you're on the other side of that and you actually are menopausal, they have one that's menopause.
Okay.
So they have perimenopause and menopause.
Nature's Way is the name of the brand.
Nature's Way, AM, PM, perimenopause formula.
Yeah. What is up with hot flashes anyway?
Oh, man. So it says the AM helps with PMS symptoms, lack of energy, irritability. I have never had that.
No. Except about an hour ago.
Mood swings. And then the PM is sleeplessness and night sweats. That's what it helps with. So
great. Good to know. Thanks.
I have been waffling back and forth on whether or not to share that. And I was like, it's a good thing.
That is something good.
It's a good thing. Yeah.
Women of a certain age will need.
So, great conversation. And on that note, until next time,
keep looking up.
I love you.
Love you too. Bye.